Walter, welcome to the Predictable B2B Success Podcast. Great to have you on. You have spent the majority of your career as a salesperson who was frequently promoted to management positions. In fact, I believe you've sold a variety of products with complex B2B sales cycles, including things like commercial signage, financial services, commercial fire alarm systems, just to name a few, selling into K-12 educators, universities, contractors, and retail firms as well. So I'm curious, given that history, what prompted the desire to create Helix Sales Development as we know it today?
That's a great question. I've always had this, I guess, I'm not sure what the right word is, this affinity for sales managers. Because every time I got promoted, I wasn't ready. Business owners often think that if you do a great job at sales, that it's a natural to go become a great sales manager. And it's usually not the case. And I remember tell this story that the first time I was promoted, it was like a sales director for North America. And I was at a Christmas party. It was they cornered me and said, hey, we want to offer you this position for next year. And I was telling my wife on the way home from the party, this is what happened. And she's, that's great. Congratulations. Have you ever managed anybody before? And I'm like, no. So it was one of those moments like, oh crap, what am I going to do? And so in that moment, you have to decide, I think, as a sales manager, what am I going to do to get better at this? And that's not always what happens. So I started Helix to be able to help those sales managers make that transition if they wanted to. Before you accept that job, you really got to be sure that's something that you're up for the challenge, because it's a challenge to deal with salespeople as opposed to being a producer.
That's interesting. You said if they want to make that transition, wouldn't it make sense for most people to do? What would be the reluctance in some quarters to not make that transition?
Often you take a pay cut. If you're a highly successful producer making sales, and you have a compensation plan that provides you with the incentives to do, taking on a role to be a sales manager, you lose some of those incentives and some of that opportunity. Now, you still should have incentives to get the team to grow, but what I've found is, in my career, is that there was a shortfall. I felt it was worth it because I got to learn a new skill and I got a new challenge, but others might not. So I think that's an important thing. If you're a salesperson being asked to do that, what do you need to know? What are you going to be willing to do? What support is the company going to give you to go make that transition? Because it is a transition.
Given your journey to date, what would you say is your personal area of strength?
Coaching. I love coaching.
And in that area of coaching, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
Wow, that's two really good questions, man. I think that at a very high level, they don't give their sales managers the space and the opportunity to coach. I think as a sales manager, we should be spending 60% of our time coaching salespeople, not just filling out reports, not managing the pipeline from a CRM, not looking at all of those metrics. Those things are important, but we really should be looking for those opportunities to work with a salesperson to help them uncover what they don't know, help them learn it in a way that's related to the deal that they're working on. To me, it's coaching. I think about it, there's interference that's causing that salesperson to not be able to grow, whether it be skill or mindset. So as a sales manager, we should be able to look under the hood and help them realize where those challenges are. So it's just, as a business owner, you need to encourage that sales manager to have the time to go coach, look for opportunities.
You make a great point there, and perhaps I'm reading into this, but correct me if I'm wrong. Would I be right in saying that perhaps most companies would mistake their internal alignment for market readiness? And if so, what specific rituals would you recommend they implement to kind of pressure test whether their leadership vision actually translates to buyer resonance?
Yeah, I think we're talking about messaging and targets. So when we onboard a salesperson, often there's too much time spent on product training, product knowledge, learning the features and benefits of a product. Important, we need to know our products, we need to know our competitors' products, we need to know our advantages and disadvantages. Absolutely. But if we're going to have a salesperson that's going to get a quick start, somebody that's going to get out of the blocks and start to build a pipeline, we need to be able to tell them who it is that they should be talking to, what our advantages are, and what that buyer is concerned about. And I look at it from this perspective. That buyer doesn't care about our product. They don't care about us, and they don't care about our company. They care about what we can offer to solve a problem that they may have. Better, solve a problem that they didn't know they had. So if we can get them to see that and get them to understand that we're working with them, we're trying to solve a problem for them, and we can engage them on that emotional level and speak the language that they speak, we're going to get there faster. So as a business owner, we want to be able to help that salesperson be clear about who their target is, what the company looks like, what that buyer looks like, what they care about, what their concerns are, and how we fit in.
Just tying this idea of helping new salespeople on board quickly, get really clear on what the product does and for whom exactly, as well as with the general sales culture that you're prescribing of coaching. It would suggest to me that there needs to be a fairly well-defined culture within the entire organization, but certainly within the sales team as well. I would assume that is a challenge in most organizations, just given their reality, which would mean that when someone like yourself comes in to help with sales coaching and development, there needs to be not just a mind shift change, but also perhaps a heart shift change. And I'm curious, how do you help them navigate that challenge?
You're right. There is a transformation that needs to take place in the hearts and minds of the sales team, but also the leadership. So I think of it this way. If a company is talking about the family and that we're a big family, we take care of each other, that I see that as a detriment to creating a high performing sales team. And let me explain. Families take care of each other. They protect each other. They make sure that nothing bad happens. And this is good. But that happens on a team as well. So if you think about an athletic team, you get selected to be on a professional athletic team. I don't care if it's a cricket, soccer, football, baseball, whatever that team is. You're selected to be there. You have a role to be on that team. And that team is expecting everybody to perform. And if you don't perform, you're going to get put on the bench. If you don't perform, you might be asked to leave the team. So I think to get to that performance mindset of that everybody is working towards that goal, it is to select talent that wants to perform, and that the culture is built around accountability, not accepting mediocrity from anybody on the team. Don't get me wrong, we have bad days. Sales is really tough. And we can have a bad week, we can have a bad month. And our coworkers, our sales team should be competitive. We should be looking to be the best, but we also should be able to support each other. You know, when we know somebody's having a tough one or they just lost a deal that they thought they were going to get, The rest of the team should come over and pat them on the butt, pick them back up, help them understand that it's just one deal. We can go get another one. We want that competition, but we want that collaboration. We want that team camaraderie. And that's a little different than a family.
Okay. So there's that work for the leadership team to work through in order to build that culture. Just staying with this idea of messaging, I believe you talk about a sifter message. Could you explain what that is and how it works?
Yeah, I think that if we think about a business owner, I have a tendency to work with those small to mid-sized companies. They've made it past the founding part and that they've grown to a certain level. And often the founder, the business owner, the president has been involved in sales and they've carried the water that far. And now they're trying to get the sales team to do what they did naturally and what they had in their head. So with the sifter message that you're referring to, we do a facilitation with all of the key players on the sales team, the marketing team, the operations team, sometimes finance, that really understand who their buyer is. They understand what that owner has been doing. And we facilitate out of those people all of this important information about what works and what doesn't work. And it's inside of that they don't realize they have. Often they don't realize it because they've just been doing it naturally and they can't transfer it to their team. So that's what we do, is we turn that around. We pull all that out, we document it for them, we create this big playbook, if you will, where we help them understand who the buyer really is, what their concerns are. We give them a psychological profile of their buyer to help them see like what their fears are, what their desires are, what they're trying to get past, and what they're trying to grow and scale to. We help them understand what the objections are. We give them what we call battle cards that help the sales team understand how to deal with an objection before it becomes an objection. If we can get in front of it and talk about it before the buyer says, hey, well, I have a problem with this. If we can have already dealt with that, this whole process goes faster. And we put the buyer first. We're going to get all the information we're going to need. We're going to do a great job at discovery because we understand our buyer. And then we teach that. Part of this program is teaching the sales team how to navigate those conversations in what we call a buyer's first process. So it takes all of those things that an owner, the founder probably has in their head that they didn't realize, and that all the other goodness that the sales performers and the sales leaders have. Pull that all together, then do our own research, and we give them this playbook to be able to go navigate this. And they're able to have better conversations and go forward.
I'd like to unpack that a little bit if I could. If I understand this correctly, perhaps one of the first steps is to identify your ICPs or ideal client profiles, and then you're trying to develop messages or refine your messaging for those specific ICPs by ensuring there's enough content and collateral, perhaps primarily driven by marketing, to address the particular ICP's objections up front before they even get to the sales team type conversations. Would that be a good broad overview?
It's pretty close. We're less concerned about the marketing collateral. What we are concerned about is making sure that the sales message is congruent with the message. So if we've attracted a buyer because of some marketing messaging and some of the information that they've gathered, and we change that up and make it sound different from a sales perspective, we lose them. They get confused. So we want that to be congruent. But what we're really helping them do is differentiate themselves in this sea of sameness that's out there. We get them to talk about what they do differently. We get them to talk to their buyers differently. They just sound different. So the buyers are engaged because they understand that we know what their problems are, we care about their problems, and that we can talk about their problems in a meaningful way and then demonstrate that we have a solution. But we have to do all of that first. because that buyer is much more educated and much more sophisticated than they were just
Certainly.
10 years ago. So it becomes, we're giving our sales teams an advantage by being able to look inside of that buyer to what they really.
I'm curious, what percentage of client messaging frameworks often fail the initial implementation, and are there distinct patterns that you've observed that separate successful adoptions from perhaps more stalled efforts?
It's a really good question. So before we enter into this process, we help them understand there's going to be pushback. There's going to be pushback from your salespeople because you're asking them to learn something different. And there might be pushback from the sales leadership because it's something different that they don't understand, that they have to learn to be able to support their team. So this is a decision that's made in the C-suite of the organization. So they need to carry that message through, like, this is important. This is why we want to do this. They're the ones that have to help the team get through that. Because if the team doesn't adopt the ideas and don't execute and implement, then it will fail. So what we see is that there's a small percentage of a team that's performing, right? Pareto's principle. 20% are producing 80% of the revenue. Those folks are like, you're giving me an advantage? Oh, and they lean into this. And then we support them for 2.5 months with training them on how to execute this, how to share this, what the tone needs to be. So this is where the rubber meets the road. But there's always going to be a few people on that sales team who just refuse to change. I've been doing this a long time is a line that we hear a lot. Okay, and you've been doing this a long time. How many new logos have you created in the last year? My revenue is more than other people's. Okay, how many new logos have you opened? How many new accounts have you started? So we have to help them see that this is a different process to grow the company. If we don't do something different, how are we going to get different results? And it's not a complete 180 shift. We're just pivoting 15, 20 degrees to get them to have just an advantage of understanding how to talk to these buyers. To answer your question, there's always a small percentage of people that just don't want to change. And then the company gets to make a decision. Do we need to replace them? Do we need to put them in a different role? How does that work? And that's where the business decides how serious are they about growing.
So, with this idea of acquiring new logos, etc., there's certainly going to be, I would think, a fair bit of outreach. And one of the issues I've noticed, at least in some companies, if not most, is the issue of pipeline bloat, where you've got all these leads that are boarding into your pipeline, but not necessarily moving forward. And I'm curious, what would be your approach to helping salespeople manage their pipelines for efficiency as well as velocity?
So velocity is what we're looking for. You're absolutely right. So often we find that a business owner will say, hey, I need help closing, need training to help my guys close better. Why do you think that? Our closing has dropped from 42% to 32%. Okay. So when we go through that process and ask the questions, we learn, not every time, but most often, the sales managers come along, a sales leaders come along and said, hey, we need 3 times or 5 times your number. So if you have $1 million quota, we want you to have $3 to $5 million in your pipeline at all times. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to spin out the $1 million. And our philosophy is different. What we're looking to do is to put a scorecard, 2 scorecards, in fact, one at the beginning. So we don't let people into our pipeline unless they're qualified. And we like to think of it as ruthlessly disqualify candidates and prospects if they don't fit our ICP, if they don't have that general feel for our target, then why would we let them in? If they don't have budget, So we're looking at scoring all of these opportunities early before we bring them in. And then as we navigate, we want to make sure that we're doing really good discovery and asking the right questions, making sure that we're finding compelling reasons for somebody to buy. There's urgency to buy. There's a problem that's big enough to fix, that it's not just a nice to have, but we gotta fix this. We must fix this. And if they don't have that, those buyers can stay with the status quo, which is really our biggest competitor more often than not. So before we give somebody a quote, before we give them a proposal, we want to make sure that we have a strong likelihood of winning that business. So there's a scorecard again before the proposal. So to really address your question, it's that we're putting crap into our pipe, and that's why it gets bloated. So if we're not diligent about what goes in there, and we're not making sure that the hygiene of our pipeline is solid, that sales manager should have a look at that every month, making sure that, like, what did we add to the pipeline? What did we take out? What closed? That's the velocity that you're talking about. Velocity can be out, it can be forward, and it can be a win. But we have to have these deals aligned with our process. And if they just start sitting there and nothing's happening because a salesperson has hope, it's not a reason to keep a deal.
So is there a framework that you prescribe to most people and sales managers to ensure that there is ongoing movement and that the leads in the pipelines are actually relevant beyond the scorecards that you talked about?
The scorecards is a piece of it. Being clear about the ICP, as you've talked about, is part of it. Because if we have people in there that aren't a fit for those, we're going to get the bloat. But I like to think about accountability as a monthly meeting that we have as soon as we have the numbers from the previous month. And this could be a month, it could be a quarter, whatever the cadence is for the business. But on a monthly basis, we sit down with that salesperson and we talk about accountability to the goals. If they've hit the accountability goals, they've hit the metrics, it's a very short meeting. We're complimentary, we're supporting them. They know that we're going to look at this every month, even though they keep doing a great job. So those people move through quickly, but we're looking at the numbers. We want to make sure that the pipeline is going to spin off business the next month too, or the next quarter. So when we talk to somebody about accountability, we're tying the accountability to what the business needs them to do, and as to what the individual wants. So each individual has some financial goal. Maybe they want to buy a cottage, maybe they want to buy a lake house, maybe they want to buy a house, maybe they want to buy a boat or an airplane. So we look for some big financial purchase and we tie that to the future. So how are we going to buy the boat if we're not doing the day-to-day, the week-to-week, the month-to-month work? So we have that big hairy goal for them of what is meaningful to them, not us, to them. And everything that we're talking about accountability ties back to that big piece. And we're doing this every month. If they miss their number, if they're close, let's look at the pipeline. Let's look and see what you have going. You're moving deals through, you're spinning deals out. This is good. It looks like you've got good hygiene here. You had a couple of deals fall out. It happens, right? But you're replacing them. You lost 2 deals, but you put 4 new in. This is a good sign. So we were looking for that hygiene. And then if they're not hitting their numbers and they're not doing the work, then we got to look at what they're doing every day. And this is where the uncomfortable piece comes in for that sales manager. You didn't hit your number. You're not doing the activities and the behaviors that we've asked you to do. So we got to look at how many meetings you have, how many calls you're making, what are you doing? In a couple of months of that, they either change their behaviors and activities or they move on, or we move them out. That's where the performance comes.
I'm just thinking back to my own experiences, and I'm curious, based on your experiences, have you noticed that top performers in sales teams, especially during discovery calls, are able to detect unspoken buyer concerns better than others? And if so, what are they doing differently? Are there certain biometric or vocal tone indicators that they're able to sense more so than other people?
There could be a couple of things. I like to think of it as really good salespeople are more curious than salespeople that are just average. They're very curious about why somebody's doing something. If you think about that 4-year-old, hey, Dad, why did we do that? Why are we doing that? Why are we doing? We don't want to be an annoying 4-year-old, but we want to be curious to understand why they're doing things, the buyer. And then we also want to be skeptical. We want to be skeptical about what they're saying and what they're doing if those don't match. If they want a goal, they want to hit a goal, but what they're willing to do isn't going to get them there. We want to share that skepticism. As a salesperson, they're willing to be uncomfortable. They're willing to create those uncomfortable conversations with the buyer and let that quiet, let that uncomfortableness, let that kind of simmer. And the salesperson that's of a performer is going to be more comfortable to do that. So that usually means they don't have a need to be liked or loved by their buyers. Now, that's a bit of a misnomer, so let me explain. We all need to be liked and loved as human beings. But in our role as a salesperson, I need to be likable for my buyer. I need to be able to build rapport and eventually build trust. But if I need that buyer to love me or like me, I'm going to have a hard time talking about money. I'm going to have a hard time asking them tough questions. I'm going to have a hard time. You've asked me like 6 really good questions. You're challenging me, right? That's what a salesperson needs to do in an interview, in a discovery call. They really need to unpack this and find out what's really going on. I had a call with a gentleman a couple of weeks ago. He had a problem that was costing him $50,000 a month. It's a lot of money. And I asked him, that's 50 grand. Is that a lot of money? And he's like, yeah, of course it's a lot of money. But I have a bigger problem. I have a problem that's costing me $500,000 a quarter. And if I don't solve that problem, I'm going out of business. Okay, fair enough. I could help him with the $50,000 problem, but I couldn't help him with the $500,000 problem. So I had to recognize that, and it took a while to get there to those issues. I had to go someplace that was uncomfortable because he had to share that those losses were piling up. So since I couldn't help him, but I knew somebody that might be able to help him. So I networked him together with somebody, and they're working on solving that problem. But I tell you the story because if I wasn't willing to dig in and peel back that onion, so to speak, with that buyer, so I wouldn't have got there. So it's that willingness to be uncomfortable. It's that willingness to go do all the things that we were told not to do as children. Don't talk to strangers, don't talk about money, don't ask a lot of questions. We were all taught that as children. As children, we don't want them to be pushy. And then as a salesperson, we go out and have to do all those things to be successful.
Again, the thought that there's a fair amount of neuroscience that could be brought to this profession. Are there techniques, neuroscience perhaps, techniques that you use to help salespeople reframe limiting beliefs about themselves, their products, or even things like price objections?
So neuro-linguistic programming, something that Dr. Bandler's developed years ago, is a real science. What we all really sell are feelings, and that's how people make decisions. So if we're paying attention to people's body language, when you ask somebody a question, if they look up to the right or they look up to the left, that tells us that's where their answers are. If we ask them a question and they respond with a visual word, the way I see this working is, right? So we know they're visual. And what I hear you say is, we know they're auditory. And I feel, right, that means they're kinesthetic. So if we adjust, to speak to your point, we need to adjust our language, our body language, our words, our tone, our pacing to make that buyer feel comfortable that we're speaking their language because we can make that huge disconnect when we're talking about something visual. We see pictures, we see movies, and somebody's listening to a tape or a record, right, as to how they visualize something or how they think about it. I'm visual, that's why I said visual. So if we start to learn about that, we're going to get another advantage. And that's really advanced. Paying attention to how a buyer speaks, how quickly they speak, the tone that they use, right? That's a whole different level. But you can win so much faster when you connect with that buyer in that way.
Certainly. What about generational cohorts, say Gen Z versus boomers? I would think there are also motivational drivers that are quite different. So how does the interplay between neurolinguistic programming and motivational drivers really come to play in terms of moving people forward in their abilities?
I think I'm not sure how those connect. I'm sure there's a connection, but I know that motivation is important for a sales manager to know how somebody's motivated. So when we do some analysis of a team, there's extrinsically motivated people, which is traditionally the baby boomers, right? They want to get paid. They'd like a little award. They like to be sent away on a vacation because they won a prize. That's traditionally extrinsically motivated. When the millennials came in, the Gen Zs came in, right? Those folks are much more intrinsically motivated, and they can be just as successful. It's not an either or. It's just how we talk to them and how do we work with them. Being cognizant of that from a neuro linguistics point of view, it's just understanding that somebody that's intrinsically motivated, they want to get paid. Money's important, but it might not be their big driver. They might be wanting to do something for the community. So if you have a product that elevates the community or solves a problem and protects the environment, or they just want to get better, they want to grow as a professional and they want to see the company grow and they want to say they played a part in it, right? That they helped everybody get better. So that's an intrinsically motivated person. So we need to be able to create the right comp plans and the right motivation and the right conversations with those folks. And then there's a third motivation finding that's called altruistic. So those folks are better at being a customer service rep than a salesperson because they have a tendency to want to be too empathetic with a buyer. They want to give away margin. They want to do everything that the buyer asks, which is better in that role where they're trying to solve a problem after a sale and be service oriented. But in sales, we need them to be more focused on the outcome.
I wonder if we could also look at forecasting process as well. We talked about pipelines, and from the sounds of it, it would be very much a linear progression. And I'm curious, how do you recommend we adjust our calculations when dealing with, say, complex, multi-threaded enterprise level deals?
I think regardless of the type of sale, B2B, B2C, we have to understand our sales cycle. And if that's 3 months or 3 years, whatever that is, that needs to be how our process is set up and managed through all of the stages and milestones of our sales process. But the forecast is going to be reliable and accurate if our pipeline is managed, right? If that is managed correctly, and it's never going to be 100%, right? I know people want it to be, but it won't. If we can get that within 10%, and on enterprise, if we can get it in that 15% range, where if we say 5 deals will spin out of this in a quarter, and the average deal size is $5 million, right? We should be able to create a reliable forecast. But it starts with, what do we let into the pipeline? How are we managing that? Are we holding people accountable to that process? Are they following the methodology? If we do all of that right, the forecast will be right. And the better we do that, the more accurate and reliable that forecast
Certainly.
is.
From a CEO's perspective, looking at pipeline and things of that nature would tend to be more of a lagging indicator of, say, potential revenue slippage. And I wonder if there are leading indicators that you would prescribe for a CEO to install on their dashboard that would indicate a potential revenue slippage, say 90 days before it even manifests.
So I had this conversation with a sales team this morning. What you do today as a salesperson, the number of calls you make, the number of text messages, the number of emails, the number of meetings, what you do today is going to inform what happens in 3 months. They have a 3-month sales cycle. So if they don't do the work today, they're going to fall short in 3 months. And every day you don't, that gets pushed out. So if we're doing what I like to call the grind, doing that sales work, whatever that is for your company, you got to do it every day. You got to be consistent. And sometimes that's hunting, sometimes it's account management where we're managing certain deals, we're managing certain relationships. Whatever those metrics are, that's what the CEO can be looking at. Did we hit if we have a volume of outreach that we're supposed to do on a weekly basis or a daily basis, did that happen? Did the deals spin off? Revenue is a lagging indicator, as you said. But if we're looking at the activities and behaviors, and we've done a good job of understanding what informs those deals to be done, how many new deals came in, right? That's another great indicator. And these are the things that a CEO can start to pay attention to. That'll be meaningful for what goes on in the future.
Certainly. Would you also prescribe a bit of a scorecard in terms of the kinds of conversations that are happening, not just with discovery, but perhaps post-discovery as well, in order to give a sense of what could potentially be in the pipeline down the track?
So if we've done a really good job, I'm going to hedge my bet here. If we've done a really good job with the sales manager and they're listening to those calls and they're coaching those calls, and it is a quality call, and we know what a quality call sounds like, we know what that information is that's supposed to be gathered, then yes. But often, somebody will say, how did the meeting go? Oh, it was great. It was a great meeting. Everybody felt good about what was going to happen, and I got to get back to them in 2 weeks. Why was that a good meeting? So if somebody says to me, and I'm sales manager, like, hey, we had a great meeting. So you got a PO? You got a deposit? No. Oh, okay. So how do you define a great meeting? So that becomes the variable there. If we have these things defined and we talk about them in the right way and we're consistent, then yes, those conversations are meaningful. But if we're not all using the same language and we're not all using the same process, that conversation piece becomes a distraction, and it doesn't lead us into something that's reliable.
So, with the rise and prevalence in the use of AI, obviously technology is now becoming a key enabler, even in sales teams. What would be your take on the fact that SDRs, or the roles performed traditionally by SDRs, is more or less irrelevant in this day and age, and that salespeople should really be focusing their skills on closing?
Every year, every couple of years, there's something that's going to cause salespeople to go away and be replaced. If you have a transactional business, like Amazon, AI can help a lot. If you have a complex B2B sale, AI can support what you're doing, but you still need to have conversations with people. They're not a robot isn't going to get it done. Yeah. We listened to a robot that was AI driven make a phone call. So we had that that robot call in to our sales meeting, and one of the salespeople answered questions. And everybody was nervous that they were going to get replaced until they heard the robot go through the phone call. It's not there, but it's a transactional thing. So if you've got a buyer that really needs information, at some level AI can support, but I'm just not one of those guys that are going to say, oh, it's going to take over our jobs and we'll be without it. Salespeople won't be needed. I think it's growing. It's going to have a huge impact, but I don't think that we're teaching people how to use AI effectively. Just think about ChatGPT or Claude. If you don't ask the right question, you're not going to get the right answer. And we're not teaching people to be critical thinkers.
So, apart from, would you recommend that salespeople invest at least a portion of their time in upskilling in that space?
Absolutely. Learn how to write a prompt. Learn what's important. It can help you outlines. It can help you create ideas. It can give you great hooks for social media. But if you don't humanize it, it's just a robot, and people can tell.
And in terms of being able to simplify or take a lot of the manual processes out of their day-to-day activities in terms of research, etc. Again, are you recommending to companies that they look to augment or complement their tech stacks?
I recommend that we simplify tech stacks and use the thing that use the tool that nobody wants to use, and that's a telephone. Reach out to people. That annoying little app on your smart device, that phone, it still works, right? You got to be good at it. And I would just say this: I'm not smart enough to tell people which part of how to use AI. That's maybe the boomer in me. I see value. I see it growing. I see it becoming very competent. I use it for certain things, but I never just take what it writes and put it over here and give it to somebody. I have to read through it, change it, and I get it to write in my voice, and I still have to clean it up and change it. And I've gotten fairly good at writing prompts, and it's just not something I trust yet.
Okay, certainly. So there's still ongoing education and a space to be watched and monitored. Talent development, and perhaps starting with hiring. I believe you have a system that helps sales managers go through this process, and I'm curious if you could walk us through it, but also tell us how it screens for failure response patterns in potential candidates.
Yeah, our process is outside in, right? We're looking at how they're going to fit into our organization, how they're going to talk to our buyers. So we start very basic. What does the salesperson need to be good at in this role? Not every role is created the same, right? There's hunters, business development people, there's account managers, there's farmers, people that are just, we have 15 accounts. Don't screw it up. Keep them, right? And sometimes we want to take those 15 accounts and grow them by 15% a year. And then sometimes it's just go out and find new business. This is what we need. So it depends upon what we want them to do. Those three things right there can make a huge difference. And maybe it's a traditional role where they got to do a little bit of everything. Okay, so what do they need to be really good at to talk to our buyers? So we really get somebody to think about before we do anything, what does that look like? What are the skill set needs to be? What are the mindset needs to be? So we write a job posting that they can use that sounds and looks different than anything that you would just see on Indeed. So we're trying to differentiate by having that ad allow the salesperson to self-identify as well as repel the people that we don't want to waste our time with. So at the same time, we're attracting and repelling. So we use a tool. If somebody applies and sends us their resume, we use an assessment tool that is focused on one thing. How does this salesperson think about sales? Do they have the will to sell? What does their sales DNA look like? What do they got going on up here? And then do they have the basic sales skills to be functional in this role? So that becomes a data point that we use. It's an important data point, but it allows us to have a look inside of somebody's head. Then we do a phone screen, very short phone screen where we're really trying to understand how this person behaves with a little bit of pressure. We ask questions that they need to be articulate about. We ask questions to make sure that they paid attention to the ad, that they can do the things that we've asked for. Then we do an interview where we look at questions and concerns around resume, questions and concerns around that assessment that they took. And then we want them to understand what the expectations of that role is. We want to understand the culture, the performance aspect of the organization. But throughout all this process I just described, we're not selling the company and we're not selling the role to the candidate because we don't know that they're the right fit yet. So we're constantly discerning whether this person is somebody that's worthwhile for us to invest in. So we teach the hiring manager to do this work, and then we bring in the other sets of eyes, right? We might have a group meeting, we might have 2 or 3 other people as part of a meeting that are higher up in the organization, leadership. We want them to look at this. We're always looking to give them structured questions that remove bias. Everybody's got bias. We want to minimize that. So we're really looking to discern this. And it's not until that last meeting that we know we got the right candidate, then that's where we start talking about, this is why you want to work at this company. This is what's great about this role. This is what you can earn in this organization. So it's opposite of what we normally do. If you're hiring salespeople the same way you hire everyone else in the organization, you're likely to get it wrong because salespeople are different.
What you say makes sense. I'm just curious because I have a different thought around that. I love your opinion. Why not invest in the branding of the company and the culture beforehand in order to get the best people, get the best culture fit candidates, I would say, into your hiring process?
Because I'm looking for performance salespeople that are going to perform. I'm looking for salespeople that have the skills and the mindset to do what they need to do in that role. The last thing we're looking for is that culture. So the job posting is out there. Our brand is known. They know who the company is. So it's a big company, little company, depending upon what somebody might be attracted to. We're not hiding the name of the company. We're just not selling it. So I've always avoided working for big companies because I'm not good with the politics side of it. That's just me. Some people like that, and that's what they're attracted to. So they don't want to go work for the small to mid-sized company. So by sharing that helps people attract and repel because we know who the entity is that's doing the hiring.
We've covered a fair bit of ground here, Walter. Perhaps I could ask you this question. In terms of aligning the overall leadership vision to revenue and bringing your sales teams on board in order to bridge the strategy and execution gap, so to speak, in sales teams, do you find there's perhaps a couple of areas that doesn't get much airtime, doesn't get talked about very much? If so, what would they be?
It's another really good question. A lot of companies have core values and mission statements, and they put them up on the wall, and they post them, and they talk about them. But leadership doesn't live them every day. So that's one piece of it. If you're going to have those values and mission statements, then they really need to be meaningful and something that the company believes in. That's aligned with the brand, that's aligned with the overall strategy. And I think that's the easy, low-hanging fruit that a company can focus on. But I think the thing that really gets missed is if I say that we want to provide great service and we want to be able to differentiate ourselves from our competitors because we take care of our customers. What the leader doesn't, they say that, they explain it, but they don't explain to the individual employees what they can do in their job with their level of authority to execute on it. And I give this example because I think it really helps. We had that belief at a company I worked at, and we differentiated ourselves because we sold a commodity. Everything was the same. So we differentiated ourselves on 1 or 2%. So we had several boxes of product that was being shipped out. And our shipping guy, been with the company a long time, he noticed that the box was damaged. So he opened it up and looked, and he found a couple of parts that were broken. So there were 5 packages. He shipped out 4, held back the 1 so that he could get the parts replaced and get it repackaged up correctly. So the customer got 80% of what they needed, and they could take the next step with their job. And when the shipping guy came to me and said, "Hey, here's what I did," I'm like, "Are you serious?" And he goes, "Yeah, is that a problem?" I'm like, "No, man, that's huge. Because if we had shipped that box out to the customer, they would have got broken parts, and they would have had a problem that they had to deal with." I said, "Now I can call the customer and say, hey, you're going to get 4 out of 5. Here's why. Here's what happened." So the customer was elated. He was totally like, "Thank you." So when he came to our building, it was a few weeks later, he brought a bunch of swag, right, a bunch of promotional stuff, and gave it to the shipping guy, because the shipping guy made a decision that was aligned with our strategy, was aligned with what I said, was aligned with what our marketing said. It all fit together. So if we don't, as a leader, don't explain to the individual what the receptionist can do, what the customer service person can do, what the person on the line can do by pulling something out, what the shipping clerk can do, we're missing it. And I think it's a subtle thing, but each one of those individuals need to know how they can make a difference in their job.
Right. And thank you for that. To wrap up, Walter, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
The strategy piece is really much more important than what business owners give credence to. And I think the other thing is that you got to have a performance-based sales organization that doesn't accept mediocrity. Once you start accepting mediocrity, it's a slippery slope.
And if listeners are curious, want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend they head to?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's a great place to just pay attention to what I do and what I say because it's consistent. That's a great place to just pay attention without getting too engaged. And if they go to my website at helixsalesdevelopment.com, there's a lot of information there, a lot of tools for people to learn more. But I'm happy to have conversations with people, and I don't pitch. I actually do the opposite. Transformation in sales is hard, and that CEO's got to be willing to go down that bumpy road. So I'm happy to share information and give people what they need to do. They got to be, to work with us, they got to be really committed to making that effort because it's important.
Absolutely. We'll include links to that in the show notes. Walter, thank you so much for doing this.
I appreciate the challenges with great questions.